There are 2 points that I'd like to communicate to you about today's presentation, and the session is intended for engineers, especially infrastructure engineers as well as data engineers, and also the data scientists for having a problem with performance, and also marketing people as well. And there are some things that we may not be able to disclose because we are not disclosing the results. And let me introduce myself briefly. And I am Masaru Kanno from Ikyu, and I am a data platform engineer at the data science. And I am in charge of ETL and BI. And this is agenda, and I'd like to explain about the company Ikyu, and also what we are doing as a user behavior, and also some of the cases. And other session title shows Ikyu is marketing over 1 billion yen in monthly transaction, as the title says, and building data infrastructure for high demand data load. And also that we have already achieved email open rate over 50% already, and what we are aiming for in the future as well. And I'd like to ask you from user point of view, have you ever made an online reservation? And the people who are viewing, I believe, say 100% yes. And specifically, for instance, toward the end of the year, we had Christmas, and Christmas is on Saturday and Sunday, so maybe user might want to find a good accommodation on PC or smartphone on the train, and maybe looking for another sites as well. And this is reasonable accommodation, but this is not the right fit for me. And you might look for another site, and you may find a coupon and make a reservation. And a week or 2 weeks ago, maybe you broke up with your lover and may have to cancel the reservation. And from a business perspective, do you have the right understanding of the user behavior? And many of you might say yes. I'd like to go deeper and ask another question. And from the business manager's point of view, do you have the right understanding of user behavior? And I don't think many of you will be able to say yes to this question. And with this assumption in mind, let me tell you about the characteristics of the company Ikyu. Ikyu's main business is online travel agent, and that's what we call OTA. And our competitors are Rakuten Travel, Jalan in Japan, and Booking.com and Expedia outside Japan. I'm sure many of you have used both, some of them. And among these, Ikyu has already nearly 17 million members, and also we are offering high-grade hotels. And specifically, this is for rich people. And specifically, the unit price for a heavy user is about 100,000 yen per night for 2 persons. Now, let me talk about the corporate culture. There are 2 major points. And first, we are always user first. And the basis of the whole discussion is based on user and how can we benefit users. And second, we have data-driven culture, and many companies say we are data-driven, and at Ikyu, we are promoting the democratization of data. And I will be talking about data analysis platform, and employees can enter SQL and extract data, and the engineers may use BI data and dashboard, but we allow users to look at the data directly. And also on a weekly basis, CEO himself prepares weekly reports, and this week about 100 pages of reports by segment, and all the employees will be able to actively look at the weekly data. And not just CEO, but also the business management will be able to look at the data and be able to have a discussion based on that. And understanding of user behavior is really important. And specifically, what do we do? We are a completely internet company. We are not face-to-face. And I talked about user behavior, and we are looking at the user, but we don't know what they are doing. So therefore, the access data is really important. And as the external services, we have introduced Google Analytics. And this is a typical story of any companies. But however, after the implementation, we faced various challenges that I'd like to share with you. There are three major challenges. First is real-time performance. Since the data was linked on a daily basis, the freshness of the data was low. Secondly, it was found that approximately 10% of the reservation activity data was missing. And so there was a 10% loss of data resulting in low accuracy. The third point is the stability of connection. And because of the external connection, normally the connection will be made around 10 a.m. But when there are delays, the linkage will be made around 11. And then the impact of this is measures taken. And there may be some opportunity losses from users' point of view. And to solve this issue, we built a real-time logging infrastructure in-house. That is quite simple now, but the production will be more complicated. And this is the minimum configuration. And from the left, I'd like to explain each component. And the whole assumption is that it is all complete with AWS. On Kubernetes, there is API, and which is called from the page. And if the traffic increases, on Kubernetes it is configured to allow easy scaling. And also Kinesis. The role of Kinesis is that the data traffic, say it's water, and this is a tap to adjust the flow of the water. And against 1,000 traffic, if you want to make it 100, be able to adjust. And also the queuing is up to 72 hours. And then Lambda will detect event as a trigger, and in parallel persist GWH directly, and also to S3. It is stored in S3. And what is the role of S3? Mainly backup and for recovery. DWH will do the persistence, and if there is any defect, there will be the loss of data. So if there is anything, then with S3, it is recovered. And how can the issue be solved, the real-timeness? And if it is the normal time, we'll be able to know the DWH with second user behavior, and also we'll be able to capture 100% the loss of data. And also about the data stability of the connection, we could solve the problem, and there's no delay due to the external factor. And there are three things that we thought were challenges. And first, about the cultural discussion, and the product needed to call, and the product needed to prepare, and it took some time to raise awareness. And that is a grassroots activity. And second, this is a technical issue, and DWS. And if there is any heavy query, maybe there are some impacts. Thirdly, and this is such an important data, so from the metrics monitoring, we use Datadog. And from the Datadog, if there is any problem, it is detected, and through Slack notification for 1 year, we are trying to detect them. And this is a real-time log foundation. And there are some cases that I'd like to introduce first. This is a real-time coupon. Thank you for waiting. And this is a title of Ikyu's marketing over 1 billion yen in monthly transaction. Other than accommodation, we have restaurants and we have the total services. And this coupon, what is this coupon like? The investment coupon. For instance, one user might say, this is too expensive and if it was this amount of money, then I could reserve and receive it out. And also the coupon amounts are dynamically changed, so it can be assumed, and this might be the amount that the user might reserve, so the coupon will be offered right away. And these are some of the issues. And first, it was difficult to maintain stability, and it's a real-time campaign, so if there is any delay due to the resources, the users might leave if there is any delay, so it's an opportunity loss. That was an issue. And talking about the resources and the allocation of the resources, the MySQL server function has the resource function called resource governor, and the function is the SQL Server Enterprise Edition. And for particular login information, the physical I/O can be reduced, so the important thing will have more allocations of resources, and if it's just a general employees, maybe it is reduced to half. And cost performance of coupons, and this is about the hyper performance and Watson and machine learning alike. And compared to rule-based machine learning, when it is performing good, maybe performing good, but it is still stable, and maybe the performance of machine learning may go down. That is another difficulty. Second is recommend. And before the Google Analytics, since it became fresher, the user similarity or the accommodation that user find it fit for them increase, so it is improved. And this is personalized top screen, and what this is to the taste of the user. The hotel accommodations offer users login. After the login, the user will see this screen, and maybe closer to Tokyo. And this is my personal stop. And so these are the accommodations close by and offered, and you can register as a new member, and hope you will try this out yourself. Next, the high availability data infrastructure recommend, and also persona. There are some issues, and the current freshness is low. And what we mean by low freshness is specifically yesterday in Kyoto, the user was looking for Kyoto, and maybe this morning looking for hotel in Tokyo in the noon. And Kyoto will be offered, but from user experience, if it was Tokyo, it will be more user-friendly. That was our view. And then on an hourly basis, the models are renewed. That's what we'd like to do. But currently, it takes about 4 hours to do the total release, so we needed to build a new infrastructure. And before talking about new infrastructure, I'd like to share with you the existing infrastructure data pipeline is Airflow, and also backflow is used. And this is a brief picture, and this is more complicated, but I made it simplified. On the left-hand side, there is so-called mass DB, and this is a mission-critical DB. And we put them onto the DWH every morning. Move to DWH.
In some cases, in the case of machine learning, for example, to the top of the slide, we call the Jupyter, and a process within the Jupyter. So here are some assumption or condition. So S3 is here. Maybe that's just the only thing that you need to know. We wanted to use one particular feature. So DWH data needs to be synced with the S3. So the basic assumption here is that the process time should be the same as the normal one. Otherwise, it's going to be the big latency is occur. So that was actually a big struggle we need to go through. And another pain point on our side is that MaskDB input resource. Well, resource has been stretched already, but if we so we couldn't do the parallel processing. Of course, we could choose the serial processing, but the serial process needs actually double time. So that was another issue that we need to figure out in order to fix those issues. So output multiplexing was being implemented. Simply speaking, so enabling multiple output for a single input is very more like similar to the serial behavior. And within 10 minutes, significant delay was prevented. So as for the multiple output, one struggle we had was there weren't so many information out there. And on the GitHub issue, so need to adjust the page size setting of bulk execution argument. And also for the Athena's feature, is something that I would like to share with you. Create table as select or go as a task. So as a result of your select, which format do you need to have? In this case, JSON, which S3 should be the location, and which bucket and IDs we need to choose, and also the number of the object for the output, in this case 100. All these features are used here. So in a summary from the left, starting from the S3 bucket synced with the DWH, and then the Athena selected using the CDAS, and that 100 objects goes into the S3 bucket using the lambda with the trigger and go in a parallel, and then I pass it on to the API. So this is what we execute. So the struggles we had here is that the biggest one is the S3 503 slowdown error tortured us a lot. So this is actually a step hot limit. So the limitation of 3500 or the 5500 as in GT, as an official, the answer to this is that just to give a pause and retry it, but that didn't fix the problem on their end. So we decided to go by bucket, because we realized that there was a limitation by the bucket, so we decided to separate the bucket to avoid the issue. Lastly, the use-defined functions, there was a request to be able to use the use-defined functions on Athena. So we fixed the issue as well. So what actually changed with all these solutions? A duration changed from the daily to hourly, and we could actually process it within 10 minutes. Surprisingly or interestingly, it was just a matter of the freshness, better freshness the users could be benefited from. But that actually pushed up the 5 to 10% improvement on the business side. So we realized on how important it is for the users to have a freshness of the data. So last but not least, about communication with the users. From the user perspective, I have a question. Have you ever experienced this? For example, here is an email titled "Recommendation for you." But the recommendation doesn't sound right to you, and the next day, another similar email comes to your box with a recommendation, but none of them work for you. So maybe some users started to block such emails or just to opt out the such email advertisement. I'm sure that any of you experience such. And then back to the business perspective. I just briefly talked about the communication experience, but there are some other experience like pop-up notifications or browser notifications or line delivery. We were looking for the possibility to implement external services, but each of them had some issues. So there are three main issues that we need to address. First of all, democratization of one-to-one CRM. So what's this one-to-one CRM in the first place? So our idea is to deliver an email to one person, but rather than doing that, 100 different type of the email sent out to the 100 different users who thinks that it's beneficial. So that is something that we wanted to do. And on top of that, democratization. And in an average company, there are like planners usually who wants to send an email to users, and this planner speak with engineers and eventually send out the email. And SQL is available for anybody at the company. So the regular, like the staff member of the companies can leverage an SQL when sending out an email. The second one is multi-channel enablement. There will be so many more channels. And more channel we need to develop accordingly. But considering that, we had a low scalability. So we had to look into that. The third one is security risks. Email address or personal information. We had to share the personal information with the third party. So from the security risk or data breach perspective, there was an issue. In order to fix these issues, we decided to go for the completely in-house development of the marketing system. So this is just a part of the admin screen. So this is actually the search screen for the advertisement campaign that actually created in the past. From the top, you can find the channels and there are the radio buttons there. Every time the campaign is added, more like the selections that you have in a variety. So for example, the head of the restaurant business say that this is a campaign that we would like to go, and here is a target, create the campaign, and send out and publish the necessary emails. And that's what we are doing already. So about the communication with the users, what we could address. So as for the democratization of one-to-one CRM, so the email is not going to be sent out every day, just once a week, but with the beneficial information sent directly to the users. And for the second part, as long as the authority is given, anybody can actually send out such email. And as for the multi-channel enablement, because of the in-house development, a certain level of the development was needed, but it's not like significant workforce required to do. And the third one is security risks. So it's 100% in-house development, so we had no worry of the data breach. Because we fix all these issues, we push up the open rate of the email to 50%. There is another argument whether there's like a 50% is a higher or low, but the average is at 15 to 25%. So even if it's like average 25%, it's double. So it's quite a high open rate we achieved. Why it's so high? Because of the one-to-one CRM that we implemented. How much the information is beneficial for the users is a key. It shouldn't be annoying. And we really weight heavily on this point. And as a result of that, we accomplished this high number of the open rate. So now we'd like to talk about the future direction and what we would like to pursue. There are three things. First, improvement of accommodation search experiences. The detailed analysis allows us to do quite a detailed analysis. Most of the users come from Google. But we really would like to encourage users to go around on the floor around within the site. And even if the fuzzy search was Tokyo or in a nice view at the time, and still be able to give a relevant result, that's we want to pull it off, and we want to catch up with what Google is doing. And the second point here is that the reservation without a search list, which might sound conflicting with what I just explained. Ultimately, the recommendation and personalization should be enhanced. So there's a relevant recommendation given back to the users, and the users are so motivated to make a reservation right away. So that's what we would like to pursue. The third point is that, like the first two are from the user perspective, but we do have our client, and we do have a client's facilities that we need to take care of. So the third point is related to that. We're approaching to the year end, and our client wants to do some campaign related to the year end holidays. And without waiting our sales rep to come back to them, they should be able to do their campaign on their own. So that kind of scheme we are trying to orchestrate. So here's a summary. As I said at the outset, we are the absolute user-first company. And as long as we are the user-first companies, then the result will come along. And the title is over 1 billion again in monthly transaction. There was just an outcome. We actually started from fixing the user's problem. As a result of that, this much of the accomplishment we enjoyed. And also as for the external services, we do not mean that we deny any external services. It really depends on what kind of struggles and pain points you have. In some cases, you may want to choose external services. However, the in-house development allowed us to pan out further because we knew that we could do more with our in-house development. However, the only downside here is that the maintenance cost would go up because of this all in-house development. So that's the only disadvantage on our side. And Ikyu has been growing so much in a business. The reason for that is that we're engaged with users with a rapid service given to the users. And also we know where we are, and we do understand where the users are and clients are. So at the end, so here's a question. Would you like to completely understand user behavior? If you are encouraged to feel in that way, that would be great, and thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Kanno. So now is the Plastoc sessions. The interviewer will go deeper related to the sessions. We would like to actually take as many questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please use the question icon at the right corner of the screen. We are happy to take your questions as well. So here is the Masayuki Tajima, the interviewer.
And I am doing a data scientist at Line. My name is Tajima. Nice to meet you. And thank you for your interesting presentation. Rather, I am a data scientist, and I do like ETL. So rather, I am from data users' point of view. I'd like to ask a question today. There are several questions, but in your presentation, you talked about the renewal of the database a few times, and the database is persisted, and also the real-time monitoring is done at the same time. And if you want to do both, maybe it is hard to do, or maybe a lot of workload. And why did you do it in parallel instead of separating them? A good question. It's only 3 years after I joined the company, and when I joined the company, I thought about that as well. But let's say at McDonald's, if you ask for one single hamburger, and in a second, the staff may say yes, or maybe after 10 seconds say yes, the user will have different feelings. And the why we have both is because of that. And to have the fastest response was the reason why we had these two at the same time. Although we are adjusting resources, first of all, we wanted to respond back to the users as quickly as possible. That's why we configured this way. Thank you. As you said, we made a lot of workload on resources, and that is our issue as well. Therefore, we separated the resources. That's why I asked the question. Thank you. And also, for recommendation, and the data up to the previous day was used, and also there are some delays on that day. And at our company, we do a lot of recommendations, but the data up to the day before is sufficient enough. And you talked about travel agencies up to yesterday, if you recommend, and also hourly data of that day. I wonder whether the result will differ that much. Well, I was talking about Tokyo and Kyoto. For recommends, perhaps not much difference, but about Tokyo and Kyoto for users, their interest changes quickly. And I was talking about travel agencies, so depending on other industry, it may differ. But once, honestly speaking, at a hindsight, it will prove to be good, but we did an output, and you have to look at the response of users. Otherwise, you won't be able to tell whatever businesses you're running. So if you try it, and if it is not working well, you can get rid of it. So try that out first. And if you cannot perform very well, maybe you can decide not to do that. That's my personal view. The transaction increased by 5% to 10%, and you change from daily to hourly on that day. The change or that impact unanimously, or is it due to the data demographics or the users being heavy or light? Well, according to the report that I showed you on the day, the CEO report on that day, the personalized top is a function, and there is a lift from yesterday. And honestly speaking, I wasn't sure, but somewhere I won't be able to answer right away from the top of my head, but in which segment we understand. And I wish I could answer right away. In Ikyu, 100,000 yen for two people at night, I think it is expensive. I don't spend that much. Maybe the data demographics of that site may affect the result, right? Yes, I believe so. And the industry was affected seriously by COVID-19. And the users who came back are the average users. Good hotels may have less people who stay at the home. So it is the pandemic is the hit for the fewer number of people. And so the heavy users are appealed by this function. And that's what we felt through the pandemic experience. Thank you. And also, Ikyu-san has high service workload, and Amazon F3 and GetHead 5,000. And IT companies try to expand the number of user of services, and the more users, the more data, and the more system workload. And do you do a lot of tunings? And if the user increases furthermore, are you going to do another tuning? Or are you going to come up with a fundamental measure?
Well, personally, this is my personal opinion, but there are two things in mind. One is very optimistic one, AWS side, elevating the hard limit, which means that really penthouse the capacity or possibility of the scalability. And in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, as company grows, And then if the AWS is not going to change, the company system is not going to change, then we need to look into some other solution, including GCP. But for the time being, we are okay with what we have. So as soon as that we understand what's going to come. Yeah, but if you are growing your service in the space as you're doing, then R&D, the scale server is something that we are using currently, but probably everything needs to be changed if the business is really taken off further. But there is no fixated idea to the AWS. So we're currently using AWS after all, but Google Analytics related to GCP is something we used before. So in the future, comparing with some public cloud available in the world, not necessarily heavily using just the one single solution, but constantly keeping an eye on some other solution. If there is a good thing for us, then we would like to actually choose the right one for us. Yeah, dealing with the data every day, the data is being on increase for the users. The users want to actually see the data and higher granularities and more detailed levels and that kind of request. I'm sure that will be placing on your table. Yeah, exactly. So I would like to take one question from the audience. On which email of the users did you actually choose? This is actually related to the email sending area. Let me try to digest. There was no machine learning. We were on a rule basis, and on top of that, we have the machine learning. But in a nutshell, from the user's perspective, every day, instead of sending the recommendation every day, but it's more like if the users never come to our site for 6 months, which means that the user is not that interested in the contents of your site. But if the users have a track record in the past couple of months, means that this person is interested in our site. So, and it is a person that comes here looking for the Kyoto, and then we can actually provide a Kyoto related information. But everything can be put it into the rule-based solution. So for this particular area, machine learning is not much reflected upon, but this is related to the data science. I'm sorry, I can actually answer only the superficial things. So mail notifications. Related to that, there is one issue is that sending too much information to users. Do you see the similar issue? We're trying to be careful, of course, but actually, opt-out is the biggest. Once it's opt-out, which means that this is not beneficial, so we try to dig deeper why this person opted out. Any other questions from the audience? Thank you, Mr. Tashima. It's about the time. If you have one more question, still the time will allow you to do so. If you don't, then we would like to wrap up the session. So the time arrived. This comes to the end of the Plus Talk session. Thank you so much